After everything we sacrificed for you, this is how you treat your own family? You think money makes you better than us, Iris? You think you can just cut us off? We are your blood. You owe us this.
She was still talking. I had already stopped hearing her. Let me take you back. Because none of this started at my front door. It started 9 years ago in a small town in Ohio when I made the mistake of falling in love with someone my mother had already decided was not good enough. And if you want to understand why I did what I did when she finally showed up with that list, you need to understand where I came from first. Milfield, Ohio. Population 2,000 and change. One Baptist church, one barber shop, and a Dairy Queen that closed every November and somehow reopened every April like nothing had happened. We had a town square with a flagpole, a hardware store that smelled like motor oil and sawdust, and a community board outside the post office where people still posted paper announcements about lost cats and church rummage sales. If you blinked driving through on the interstate, you missed it entirely. I was born there. I grew up there. And for a long time, I thought that was the whole world. My parents were Kenneth and Diane Archer. Kenneth sold insurance out of a little office on Clover Street, the kind of office with a plastic fern in the window and a brass nameplate on the door. He was mild, Kenneth, easygoing, the kind of man who let things happen to him rather than making choices about them. He had kind eyes and a handshake people trusted, and a way of going very quiet when anything difficult came up, like a thermostat that just clicked off. I loved my father. I want to be honest about that. But love and respect are two different things, and I did not always have both for Kenneth Archer at the same time. Diane Archer was a different creature entirely. My mother was the kind of woman who brought a casserole to every funeral and made sure people saw her do it. She sang in the church choir. She organized the Christmas food drive. She said, "Bless your heart," in a way that sounded like a blessing but was not. She had a specific laugh she used for people she liked, and a different, shorter one she used for everyone else. And if you were not paying attention, you could not tell them apart. If you were paying attention, which I always was, you could. My sister Paige never had to pay that kind of attention. Paige was the one our mother exhaled around. 2 years older than me, blonde where I was dark-haired, easy where I was careful. The one who could walk through a room and make everyone feel like they had been visited. Paige got a birthday party every year. Streamers, cake from the good bakery in Hartwell. Friends from school crammed into our living room with silly string and wrapped gifts. I got a grocery store sheet cake and a card signed by both parents that always said, "We love you, Iris," in my mother's handwriting only. I am not telling you that to make you feel sorry for me. I am telling you because a woman who grows up understanding that love has a budget, that some people are line items and some people are afterthoughts, does not forget that lesson. It goes somewhere inside her. And it either breaks her or it makes her very, very precise. I became precise. I was good at school. Quietly, seriously good. Math especially. Numbers made sense to me in a way that people often did not. They meant what they said. They did not have a public laugh and a private one. My 7th grade teacher, Mrs. Callahan, pulled me aside after a test and said, "Iris, do you know what you just did?" I had solved a problem the way the textbook had not shown us. I had found a shorter path. She looked at me like I had done something remarkable. I went home that afternoon and told my mother. She was on the phone. She waved at me to wait. By the time she hung up, she had forgotten I had something to say. That was fine. I had already learned not to need witnesses. High school. Then a full scholarship to Ohio State. Accounting, then finance. I was the first person in my family to get a merit scholarship. Diane told the women at church, and I know because Mrs. Felter told me she had, but she did not tell me herself. She told her friends. She did not tell me. That was just how it was. I packed my own car. Kenneth helped carry the boxes. Diane stood on the porch and said, "Call when you get there." She went inside before I pulled out of the driveway. Columbus was enormous to me, loud and fast and full of people who did not know each other and did not particularly need to. I loved it. I got a part-time job at a campus financial aid office, learned the system from the inside out, tutored 3 other students in statistics to pay for my books, and by my junior year I had a 3.97 GPA and a reputation in the finance department for asking questions that made the professors think. That was also the year I met Marcus Ellison. And I want to tell you exactly how that happened because it matters. It was not at a party or a bar or even a class. It was at a taco truck. There was a taco truck that parked outside the engineering building every Tuesday around noon, and the line was always 15 people long because the al pastor was actually extraordinary and everyone knew it. I was standing in line reading a case study. I was always reading something. And the person behind me tapped my shoulder and said, "Chapter 4, right?" Iris, the memory lighting her up. I turned around. Tall, quiet eyes, light brown skin, his mother black and his father white, and the jawline that I am not going to pretend I did not notice immediately. He was holding a worn copy of the same corporate finance textbook I was holding, and he had flagged the same chapter with a sticky note. "You're in Kellerman's class?" I said. 2 sections over. He pointed at my sticky note. "You marked the Modigliani-Miller section. I've been trying to figure out that theorem for 2 weeks." The warmth of someone telling the most important story of their life. We talked through the taco truck line. We got our food and sat on the engineering building steps and talked until 2 o'clock. He was an engineering student with a minor in applied mathematics. He thought in systems the way I thought in numbers. He was quiet but not shy, the kind of quiet that was actually a form of respect, like he was listening carefully enough that he did not need to fill the air. I had never met anyone like that before. Most people talk to show you they exist. Marcus talked because he had something to say. I went home that night and did not tell anyone about him. I kept him like something I was not ready to share yet. We studied together every Tuesday, then Thursdays. Then we started walking to the library together after his last class. And one evening in November, standing outside the library in the cold while the campus lights came on one by one, he asked if I wanted to get dinner. Not at the taco truck, somewhere real. I said yes. We went to a diner on High Street and split a piece of pie and talked for 4 hours, and by the time we were done I knew 3 things. That he was the most interesting person I had ever sat across from, that he was going to matter to me, and that I was going to have to figure out how to tell my mother. That last one, I put in a drawer and did not open for 8 months. Those 8 months were some of the best of my life. We graduated, me first, him 6 months later, both of us with strong enough credentials to get real offers. I went into financial analysis at a consulting firm in Columbus. He went into structural engineering at a firm downtown. We found a small apartment together, 2nd floor of a duplex on Treetop Lane, with a radiator that banged all winter and a kitchen window that looked straight into the neighbor's fire escape. We bought a second-hand couch and a coffee table from a church rummage sale and a set of pots and pans from Target, and it felt like enormous abundance to me. It felt like home. The call to Milfield came on a Saturday morning in February. Marcus was making coffee. I was at the kitchen table. I had rehearsed what I was going to say. I had literally written notes on a legal pad. I was a financial analyst. I approached difficult conversations like a presentation. I had points, supporting evidence, a clear open. I called my mother's number. She answered on the 2nd ring. I said, "Mom." She said, "Iris," and she sounded pleased, and for a second I thought, maybe this is going to be okay. Maybe I built this up too much in my head. Maybe she is just a woman who sang in the choir and brought casseroles to funerals, and she loves me, and she is going to hear his name, and she is going to say, "Tell me about him." I said, "I've been seeing someone." For almost a year. He's important to me and I want you to meet him. His name is Marcus Ellison. He's an engineer. 7 seconds of silence. I counted them. I know because I was looking at the clock on the microwave. Then she said, "What does he look like, Iris?" Just like that. Not what does he do, not how did you meet, not is he good to you. What does he look like? I told her. I said he was biracial. His mother was black, his father was white. I said he was the best person I had ever known. I said I hoped she would keep an open mind. She said, "I will need to speak to your father about this." And then she said, "I hope you know what you're doing." And then she hung up. I sat at that kitchen table for a long time. Marcus brought me a cup of coffee. He had heard enough through the kitchen to know. He sat down across from me and did not say anything for a minute. Then he said, "Do you want me to call her?" I said no. I said, "Give her some time." I gave her time. 3 weeks went by, then 6. My father called once, said things were a bit complicated, and that Diane needed more time to think it through. I asked what there was to think through. He went quiet the way he always did, that thermostat clicking off. I asked if they wanted to meet Marcus. He said he would talk to her about it. They did not come to Columbus to meet Marcus. They did not invite us to Milfield. What they did instead was send a letter. I am going to stop right here because I want you to understand something. This letter, I almost did not keep it. I almost threw it away the same night I read it. And I am so glad I did not. Because that letter became item 1 in the binder. And without item 1, the rest of what happened in my kitchen 9 years later would not have gone the same way at all. The letter was 3 paragraphs. It was handwritten. It was my mother's handwriting. I knew it from every birthday card, from the grocery lists she left on the counter, from the labels on jars in the pantry. It was hers completely. The letter was from The first paragraph said that they had raised me in a Christian home, and that they had certain values that had guided their family for generations, and that those values included something she called the importance of marrying within your community. She did not say race, she said community. The word was doing a lot of work. The second paragraph said that while they had nothing personal against Marcus, they had never met him, had made no attempt to meet him, but had nothing personal against him, they could not in good conscience welcome this relationship into the family. She said she hoped I would reflect carefully on what I was choosing. The third paragraph said, "If you continue with this, Iris, you will be making a choice that takes you out of this family. That is not a threat. That is simply the truth of what this means for us." That is simply the truth. She wrote it like a policy memo, like she had consulted legal, like she was explaining the terms of a contract I had already signed and was now violating. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it, put it in an envelope, labeled it with the date, and put it in the navy blue binder I had bought for my personal financial records. I went back to the kitchen table. Marcus was still there. He had made dinner while I read. He looked up when I came in. I sat down. I said, "She meant it." He said, "I know." I said, "I'm choosing you anyway." He said, "I know that too." We got engaged the following spring. Not a big proposal. Marcus was not a man for grand gestures. He came home one evening from a long project, sat down at the table, slid a small box across to me and said, "I want to marry you, if you want to marry me." The ring was simple. It had been his grandmother's. He said she had told him to give it to someone who would not lose it in the cushions of a couch she did not actually own. I laughed so hard I cried. I said yes. I told my parents. My father said he was happy for me and then immediately asked if I had spoken to my mother yet. Paige texted back a smiley face and, "Congratulations!" 2 exclamation marks, and that was the last I heard from her for 6 months. Diane did not respond. Not a call, not a card, not a single word. We got married on a Thursday in October, Columbus Courthouse. Judge Martinez, who had reading glasses on a chain and a lilac plant on her desk, and who said our names right on the first try. Marcus wore a dark blue suit and a tie I had helped him pick. I wore a dress I had found at a consignment shop on High Street, cream-colored, simple, fitted at the waist, $160 with alterations. I thought it was the most beautiful thing I had ever owned. There were no family members on my side, not one. Marcus's mother Kora was there, his Aunt Dolores and her husband Raymond, 2 of his cousins who had driven from Cleveland. They sat on both sides because there were no sides, not really, and they kept offering me tissues because I kept crying. Not from sadness, but from something harder to name. Relief and grief at the same time. The strange feeling of something ending and beginning in the same breath. After the ceremony, we stood on the courthouse steps and Kora took our picture. She had a point-and-shoot camera, the kind with actual film, and she said, "Stand closer, closer. You're married now, you can touch each other." And Marcus laughed and put his arm around me, and I held onto it like a railing. She took 12 photos. She printed them and mailed one to us every month for the next year with a little note on the back. Just small things. "You looked so happy. He always had that smile. I am so glad you picked him." Kora Ellison. While I was standing on those courthouse steps without a single person from Milfield, Ohio, Kora Ellison was already on her way to becoming the grandmother my children were going to know. She flew from Cleveland to Columbus 4 times in the first year of our marriage. She learned what I liked to eat. She brought me a hand-crocheted blanket in blues and greens because she said those were calm colors and she thought I needed calm. She asked about my job. She remembered the details. She showed up. That is all it was, and it was everything. The first 2 years of marriage were hard in the way that early years are hard, when you are building everything from nothing. Marcus and I were both working, both paying off student loans, both trying to save. We had a system. We were very good at systems. But there were nights in that duplex when the radiator banged, and we were both exhausted, and I would look across at him and think, we did this without anyone. We built this room with our own hands, and nobody came to help us hang the walls. No birthday cards from Milfield, no Christmas calls, nothing. It was like I had already died to them, and they had moved on with the grief. What I had was work. I threw myself into it. By year 3, I had moved from analyst to senior analyst to director. I was good at seeing the shape of things. Not just the numbers, but what the numbers were pointing toward, the pressure underneath the surface, the story the data was telling before anyone else heard it. My boss at the time, a woman named Clarissa Rhodes, told me I had what she called structural intuition, the ability to look at a financial model and sense the fault lines before they opened up. It was Clarissa who introduced me to Daniel Park. Daniel Park was building a fintech startup in Columbus that was trying to do something genuinely new with insurance underwriting. He needed someone who understood both the financial modeling and the regulatory framework. Clarissa gave him my name. He called me on a Wednesday afternoon. We had coffee the following morning and talked for 2 hours. By the end of that coffee, I knew he was onto something real, and he knew I was the person who could help him build it. I quit my director job. We incorporated. I became the co-founder and CFO of what would eventually become Arculus Financial. I took a significant pay cut and an equity stake. Marcus thought I was brilliant and said so. He was also taking a professional leap at the same time, leaving his engineering firm to join a startup that was building material sensing technology. We were both betting on ourselves. We were both terrified. We did not let each other show it at the same time. Those years, building Arculus. I want to say something about them because this story can sound, if you are not careful, like it is only about damage and betrayal. but it is also about what Marcus and I built in the middle of all that silence. We worked hard. We cooked dinner together on Sundays and meal prepped for the week. We took cheap weekend trips. Lake Erie once, the Smoky Mountains once, a terrible 3-day camping trip where it rained constantly and we played cards under the tarp until midnight. We made each other laugh. We were genuinely, sustainably, quietly happy. I do not take that for granted for one single second. The twins were born in June, 4 years after our courthouse wedding. A boy and a girl. We named them Jordan and Celeste. Jordan had Marcus's quiet eyes immediately, from the first hour. Celeste came out already looking like she had opinions. She has never stopped having them. They were early, 35 weeks, and small, and I spent 6 days in that hospital watching their tiny chests rise and fall and thinking about nothing else in the universe. Kora flew in from Cleveland the morning after they were born. She came through the door of the NICU with a bag of food she had cooked and frozen and packed in ice, and she set it down at the nurse's station and said, "I'm the grandmother. Where are they?" And they pointed her to the isolettes, and she stood there for a full minute without saying anything. Then she reached through the side port of Jordan's isolette and put one finger against his little fist, and he curled his fingers around hers, and she said, very quietly, "Hello, baby. I've been waiting for you." I sent a birth announcement to Milfield, Ohio, 2 days after they were born. It came back unopened 6 weeks later. I stood at my mailbox in the parking garage of our building in the Columbus winter, holding a cream-colored envelope with a return stamp on it that said, "Return to sender." Inside was a card with Jordan's and Celeste's footprints. The hospital had helped me make them. Blue ink for Jordan, pink for Celeste. Their names, their birth weights, their time of arrival. A line that said, "We are so happy to meet you." Return to sender. I took it inside. I labeled it. Item 5 in the binder. Because by then there were already 4 other items. The original letter, a returned birthday card from 2 years before, a voicemail transcript I had typed out because I did not trust the audio to last, and the screenshot of a text that Paige had sent me the previous Christmas. "Mom says you're not calling enough. Not trying to start anything, just FYI." Like she was a bystander reporting from a fire she had helped set. The week after the birth announcements came back, Kora sat in my kitchen and held Celeste while I ate soup she had made, real soup with actual vegetables, and she said, "Iris, I want to ask you something, and I don't want you to feel like you have to answer." I said, "Okay." She said, "Are you all right? Not with the babies, with the rest of it." I told her about the returned cards. She listened. She did not say she was sorry, which was the right thing to do because she had nothing to be sorry for. She said, "Those children are going to know who loves them. They are going to know it every single time I walk through that door." And then she said, "Do you want more soup?" And I said yes, and she got up and got me more soup. Here is what the next 4 years looked like. Every birthday card I sent to Milfield came back. Every holiday. I sent Christmas cards with photos of the twins every December. They came back every January. Jordan's first steps, Celeste's first word, opened by no one, returned by someone, I assume Diane, with the efficiency of a woman who had made her peace with the decision and was not going to waver. 11 items in the binder by the time the twins turned 2. And every single time one of those cards came back, Kora showed up. Not because I called her crying, though sometimes I did, but because she was on a schedule she had set for herself. Every 6 weeks, Cleveland to Columbus. She knew the twins' favorite colors. She taught Jordan how to make grilled cheese. She crocheted Celeste a blanket with her name on it. She came to Jordan's kindergarten concert and sat in the front row and recorded the whole thing on her phone and texted the video to everyone she knew. Meanwhile, Arculus was growing. We had closed our Series A in year 2. Series B in year 4. By year 5, we had expanded into 3 states and were managing underwriting for nearly 40,000 policies. Daniel was the CEO and visionary, brilliant, creative, sometimes scattered. I was the person who made sure the engine did not fall off the car. We had built something that actually worked, that was actually solving a real problem in the insurance market, and the numbers showed it. By the time the twins were in first grade, we were in serious conversations with our investment bankers about going public. The valuation was climbing. Our Q4 numbers had come back stronger than projected. The board was excited. I was excited, and also terrified, and also tracking 17 different things at once, because that is what a CFO does during IPO prep. You live in spreadsheets and due diligence requests and regulatory filings, and you do not sleep very much, and you drink too much coffee, and you forget to eat lunch, but you know every single number in every single document, because that is the job. It was right around this time that Paige came to Portland. Oh, we had moved, threading it in. We had moved to Portland by then, Oregon. Marcus's firm had opened a West Coast office and offered him a senior position. And Portland made sense for us. Good schools, clean air, a food scene that I was not going to complain about, and enough distance from Milfield, Ohio that I did not have to think about it every day. Paige sent me a message in March saying she was going to be in Portland for a work conference, and could we get coffee? I had not seen Paige in almost 5 years. I was cautious. I had always been cautious with Paige. Had always felt that thing in her I could not name, the warmth on the surface and something else underneath. But I said yes. She was my sister. I said yes. We met at a coffee shop in the Pearl District, a Wednesday afternoon. She looked good. Paige always looked good. New highlights, good coat, the kind of bag that you notice without knowing why. She hugged me at the door and told me I looked amazing. I smiled back, and neither of us said what we were really thinking. She asked about the twins first, their names, their ages, what they were into. I answered. She said, "Oh my gosh, they sound so great. I would love to meet them sometime," in a tone that meant she had not actually thought about meeting them until this moment. I registered that, noted it. Then she started asking about Arculus. Question 1. How long had we been operating? Question 2. How many states? Question 3. What market were we in? Question 4. Who was the CEO? Question 5. How did the ownership structure work? Question 6. What stage were we at? Question 7. Had we done any M&A? Question 8. What was our burn rate? Question 9. Who were our investors? Question 10. Was Daniel planning to stay involved post-IPO? I answered questions. I was careful with what I shared. I watched her face as she processed each answer. She was good. I will give her that. She was genuinely good. She asked with just the right amount of casual interest, the way you ask someone about their work when you are just curious and not extracting information. She topped up our coffees. She said wow in the right places. She asked follow-up questions that showed she had been listening. Questions 11 through 20 were more specific. Revenue projections, growth trajectory, whether we had institutional investors from the West Coast or mostly Midwest, whether we were planning any secondary offerings, what the employee count looked like, what our EBITDA looked like. She did not use that word. She said, "So you're actually making money now?" But that is what she meant. Questions 21 through 32 were about me personally. Did Marcus and I own equity jointly or separately? Were our finances combined or did we keep separate accounts? Did I have a business manager or did I manage things myself? Was our Portland house rented or owned? What neighborhood? What kind of security did we have? Did I still have ties to Columbus? People, property, anything? 32 questions. I counted every single one. I sat in that coffee shop across from my sister, and I watched her top up my coffee for the third time, and I thought, she is not here for a conference. She came here to scout me. She hugged me at the door when we left. She said we should do this more often. She said it so warmly, with such real-seeming affection, that for about 45 seconds I wondered if I was being paranoid. Then I went home and I wrote down all 32 questions in order, and I read them back to myself, and I was not paranoid. I had no idea that that coffee was going to be the thing that made everything else make sense when the next piece arrived 3 weeks later. 3 weeks after our coffee, Paige added me back to a family group chat she had quietly removed me from sometime in year 3 of my marriage. I do not know if she added me intentionally or by accident. I suspect she added me intentionally and then immediately realized the mistake, because within 45 seconds of being added, she removed me again. 45 seconds. But I have fast thumbs, and I had already seen the messages. These are sacred documents to her. The group chat was called Family. The members were Diane, Kenneth, Paige, and 2 cousins I barely knew. The messages I saw were from a thread that had been going for approximately 2 weeks. Paige was the architect of the conversation. She had laid out a plan in pieces over multiple messages, the way you build a case brick by brick so nobody sees the full structure until you are ready to reveal it. The first message I saw was from Paige, saying that the IPO timing was imminent, her word, and that it was now or never. She said the valuation was going to make things complicated once it became public, and that the family angle was the only leverage they had. The family angle. The next message said that the approach needed to look organic. She wrote, and I remember this almost word for word because I photographed it immediately. She wrote, "Layer it. Make it look like family investment. Don't come in with a list. Come in with a feeling. Mom first, then we present the numbers once she's inside the house." She used that phrase, inside the house. The third message I saw was from Diane, and it was 2 words. I'll go. I screenshotted everything I could see before I was removed from the chat. 7 screenshots. I labeled them. I printed them. I put them in the binder. That was item 14. And then I waited. IPO finally here. The IPO was on a Tuesday in September. We rang the opening bell remotely. NASDAQ had set us up with a live stream ceremony, and Daniel and I were at our Portland office with the core team, and we watched the number climb on the screen while people I had worked beside for 5 years put their hands over their mouths or their eyes or each other's shoulders. Iris, the number, said plainly, $440 million. Market cap. Our market cap. Iris, not triumphant, more complicated than that. I want to tell you what I felt in that moment and be honest about it. I did not feel like I had won something. I felt settled. The way a column feels when the numbers finally balance, like the model had proven out, like the years of not sleeping and not eating lunch and running projections at midnight and making 112 decisions a week that nobody else could make, like all of that had landed somewhere real. Not rich, real. Iris, a pause, her phone. My phone was in my pocket, on silent. After the ceremony, after the champagne, after Daniel gave a speech that made 3 people cry, I went to the bathroom and took my phone out and looked at it. 5 missed calls from a Milfield, Ohio area code. I looked at those 5 missed calls for a long time. I did not call back. That evening, Kenneth left a voicemail. He left it on my cell phone, not Marcus's, not through Paige, directly. His own voice. And I want to tell you about this voicemail because it is one of the most complicated things that happened in all of this, and I do not want to get it wrong. He said, "Baby girl, it's your dad. I saw the news this morning about your company, about what you built." And then he stopped for a second. I could hear the pause on the recording. "I just want you to know that I'm proud of you. I always have been. I know I haven't. I know things have been. And then he stopped again. I'm proud of you. That's all I called to say. You don't have to call back if you don't want to. You don't have to call back if you don't want to. I listened to that voicemail 4 times. And I want to be fair to my father. He was not calling because of the IPO, the way Diane was calling because of the IPO. I believed that. I still believe it. I think Kenneth Archer watched his daughter's name scroll across a financial news ticker and felt something real. I think he had always felt something real. I think he had just been too cowardly for 9 years to let it matter more than what Diane said at the kitchen table. Being proud of someone and doing nothing for them for 9 years is not the same thing as loving them correctly. I knew that. I had my own children. I knew what showing up looked like because I had watched Kora do it 216 times. 216. 6 weeks between each visit, 9 years, Portland and Columbus both. I did the math. 3 weeks after the IPO, on a Saturday morning in October, the doorbell rang. Marcus was in the kitchen. The twins were at a friend's house. The morning was quiet. I had been at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the binder, which I had taken out the night before to make sure everything was in order, dated correctly, labeled clearly. I had known something was coming. The calls from Ohio, the silence from Paige after the chat screenshots, the reconnaissance at the coffee shop, the math of it. I got up and went to the door and opened it, and there was Diane Archer on my front porch in Portland, Oregon. 63 years old. Church coat. She was always in a church coat, even on a Saturday, and a handbag I did not recognize, and her hair the same shade of honey brown she had kept it for my entire life. She was holding a manila envelope. Kenneth was not with her. I looked at her. She looked at me. For maybe 4 seconds, neither of us said anything. I opened the door wider. I said, "Come in." Not because I was glad to see her, because I had the binder and I was ready. She came in. She looked around the house the way you look at something you are appraising rather than admiring. She did not say the house was beautiful, though it was. She did not ask about the twins. She sat down on the living room sofa and she did not wait. She opened the envelope and she pulled out the list. $925,000. Broken into items. This is what I want you to understand. She had categories. It was itemized. Paige had been thorough. There were line items for family support over the years in which they had made no contact and provided nothing. There were line items for emotional distress. There were line items for what she called estrangement damages, as if there were a legal category for choosing not to speak to someone who married a man you did not approve of. There were line items for Paige, her contributions to family unity, unspecified. There was even a line item for my grandmother's furniture, which I had not taken, had not been offered, had not wanted. Iris, the absurdity of it, not laughing. $925,000. Iris, and then Diane started speaking, the scene from our opening. That was when she started. Iris, hollow, quoting the opening again, the circle closing. After everything we sacrificed for you, this is how you treat your own family? You think money makes you better than us, Iris? You think you can just cut us off? We are your blood. You owe us this. I let her finish. She went on for a while. I am going to be honest with you. I did not hear most of it. I was not in the room the way she thought I was. I was listening the way I listened to a presenter in a board meeting who has not done the work. I was clocking the gaps between the substance, the places where the argument had no foundation, the moments where the emotion was supposed to substitute for the evidence. I got up. I went to the kitchen table. I came back with the navy blue binder. I set it down on the coffee table next to her manila envelope. She looked at it. She looked at me. I opened it. I said, Item 1, February 14th, 9 years ago. A letter. 3 paragraphs. Handwritten. Your handwriting. I did not read it aloud in full. I summarized its contents. I told her what paragraph 3 said. I said the date. I put it face up on the table. Item 2, 11 months later. A birthday card, my 31st birthday, returned unopened. Postmark date, carrier stamp, your address as return sender. She tried to speak, opened her mouth. I said, I'm not finished. Item 3, a voicemail transcript, October, 8 years ago. I called your house and left a message saying we were expecting children. The message was not returned. This is a printout of the transcript of that voicemail, time-stamped. She said something, Diane. I don't remember what. She started to say something. I remember the tone. It was the tone she had always used when she was shifting the terrain, trying to find the angle that made her the victim. I do not remember the exact words. I remember the tone. I said, I'm not finished. Item 4. A birth announcement for twins Jordan and Celeste Ellison, returned unopened, February, 7 years ago. I put it on the table. Item 5. Same announcement, second mailing. I sent it twice, I want to be accurate. Returned, February, 7 years ago, 3 weeks later. I put it on the table. Item 6. A Christmas card with photos, returned, January, 6 years ago. Table. Item 7. A birthday card, Jordan's 3rd birthday, returned. Table. Item 8. A birthday card, Celeste's 3rd birthday. They are twins. They came back 1 week apart. Table. Item 9. A letter I wrote asking to speak by phone, returned, unopened. Table. Item 10. A screenshot of a text from Paige, December 5 years ago, in which she described my absence from the family while you were the one who had made contact impossible. She was looking at the pile. Around item 12, she started to cry. Not immediately, but building. The kind of crying that you can see being assembled, breath by breath. I watched it happen. I thought about Paige's instruction, come in with a feeling. I thought about item 14. I said, I'm not finished. Item 11, Christmas card, year 5, returned. Table. Item 12, a card congratulating you on your anniversary. I sent it. I want you to know that. I sent you an anniversary card in year 5. Returned, unopened. Table. Item 13, a photograph. Jordan and Celeste at their kindergarten concert. Mailed to your address. Returned. Table. Item 14. I looked at her. A screenshot, 7 images, from a family group chat I was accidentally added to 3 months ago. Her face changed. I said, these images show a conversation in which my sister Paige outlined a plan to approach me for financial support after my company's IPO. She used the phrase, the family angle. She recommended that the approach look organic and that you, specifically, should make initial contact before any financial figures were presented. The conversation included a message from you. 2 words. I'll go. I put the screenshots on the table. Items 15 through 22 were the continued pattern. Returned cards, ignored calls, dated printouts of each voicemail I had ever left that was never returned. I read them in order. I said the dates. I said what the occasion was. I put each one on the table. The coffee table was covered. She tried to interrupt again around item 19. Somewhere around item 19, she said something about how I had to understand what things had been like for her. I said, very calmly, very plainly, I'm not finished. Item 23, a record. This one is not about you. This one is about the woman who actually showed up. I put down a piece of paper with a printed list. Kora Ellison, Cleveland to Columbus to Portland, Visits recorded. 29 visits over 9 years. Dates here corroborated. The woman who was present at my children's birth, who taught my son to make grilled cheese, who crocheted 2 blankets, one for each twin, with their names on them, who attended 7 school events, who called every Sunday without fail, who flew across the country on 6 weeks' notice every time there was something she could witness in person. I put it on the table. That is item 23. Diane was not crying anymore. She was very still. Items 24 through 28 were professional records, public filings, board documents, dated materials that established the timeline of Arculus, when we incorporated, when we began growing, when the IPO process began. I wanted her to understand precisely that there was no version of this in which she had been present for the building, that she had absented herself completely, and that the return, the reappearance, could be placed within 3 weeks of a publicly announced valuation. The math was not subtle. Item 29. I paused. The list you brought today. Itemized. $925,000. Dated with today's date by me because you did not date it yourself. Filed here as the final entry. I closed the binder. I looked at my mother. No raised voice, no tears, just the truth. I said, I kept every piece of it. I kept it because I am a CFO, and I kept it because I am your daughter. And I kept it because I knew that one day you were going to stand in front of me and tell me I owed you something, and I needed to be able to show both of us exactly what the record said. Our record says you were not here. The record says you returned every attempt I made to include you. The record says you made a choice 9 years ago about who counted and who did not, and you made that choice because of who Marcus Ellison is, and I want you to hear me say that clearly and plainly. That is what it was. It was not about values. It was not about community. It was not about God. It was about who Marcus Ellison is, and it was wrong, and it caused real damage, and I documented every piece of that damage. I am not writing you a check. She started to say something. I remember the tone. The same tone she used in that letter 9 years ago, the one that sounded like policy. I do not remember the exact words. I did not need to. I stood up. I said, I think we're done. She gathered the manila envelope. She did not take the items from the coffee table, my items, my documents. They stayed where I had put them. She stood. She did not look at me directly when she got to the door. She started to say something, one more time. I did not ask her what it was. I opened the door. The door clicked shut. I stood in my front hallway for a moment. I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. I could hear Marcus moving somewhere upstairs. Outside, a car went by, a bird. A completely ordinary Saturday morning in October. I went back to the kitchen table. I sat down. I put the binder in the center of the table. I looked at it for a while. Marcus coming downstairs. He had heard enough. Not the words, but the fact of it, the shape of it. He came into the kitchen and he looked at me and he looked at the binder and he said, "You okay?" I said, "I think so." A pause. "Yeah, I think I actually am." He sat down across from her, his hand on the table, and put his hand on the table palm up, the way he does when he is saying you do not have to say anything else. And I put my hand in his, and we sat there for a while without talking. The weeks after that were quieter than I expected. Paige texted 6 days after Diane's visit. One sentence. "I heard it didn't go well. I hope you're okay." That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement of the screenshots, no explanation. One sentence designed to sound like concern while doing none of the work of concern. I read it. I did not reply. I labeled it item 30 in the binder. Then I put the binder on the shelf in my home office where I keep the files I do not need to access every day, but want to be able to find. Kenneth called 10 days after the visit. He had heard from Diane what had happened. I do not know exactly what version she gave him, probably a version in which she had gone to make peace and I had ambushed her with paperwork. That is the version Diane would tell. But Kenneth, I have thought about this a lot. Kenneth probably already knew it was not the whole truth, because Kenneth had always known things were not the whole truth. He had just chosen not to know them out loud. Iris, his call, honest about what it was and was not. He called me on a Thursday evening. I answered because I had decided in advance that I would answer. He said my name, I said his. There was a pause. He said, "I owe you an apology." I waited. He said, "Not for this week, for 9 years of weeks." I kept waiting. He said, "I knew it was wrong. What she did, the way we handled it, I knew it was wrong, Iris. I didn't say so. I should have." Another pause. "I'm sorry. I am genuinely sorry. Not want to be honest with you about what I felt when he said that." I did not feel healed. I did not feel like 9 years of returned birthday cards dissolved into nothing. I did not feel the way you feel in movies when the parent says the thing and the music comes in. What I felt was careful, like someone who has learned to test the ice before walking on it. I said, "Thank you for saying that," because I meant it. He had said it, and he had meant it, and that was real, even if it was not enough, and even if it was late, and even if I did not know what to do with it yet. I told him I was not ready for visits. Not yet. I told him I was willing to talk on the phone. I told him the conversations needed to be what they were. I was not going to manage his guilt for him or cushion his way back in. I said, "You can call, and I will answer, and we will see what we are to each other after that." He said that was more than he had a right to ask for. I think he was right about that. That was 8 months ago. Full and real and earned. Kenneth calls on Sunday evenings now. We have had some awkward calls and some easier ones. He has asked about Jordan and Celeste, carefully, like someone who knows he has not yet owed the stories. I have told him small things. He has not tried to make it more than it is. That is all I asked for, and he has done it, and I noticed that. Paige has not called. I have not called Paige. The screenshot of her text is still item 30 in the binder. I do not expect a 31st item. Diane has not contacted me. I do not know if she ever will. I have thought about what I would do if she did. I think I would answer. I think I would listen. But I know what I would not do. I would not rewrite the story to make it easier for her to live in. The binder is the binder. The record is the record. I did not make those facts. I only kept them. The twins are 8 now. Jordan is building things, actual things, little structural systems out of every material he can find, just like his father. He got a set of magnetic tiles for his birthday, and he has not stopped. Celeste is reading everything. She went through the Percy Jackson series in 3 weeks and is already lobbying for the sequel books, and she has opinions about the writing that are, frankly, not wrong. There is a photo on our refrigerator. It is from Christmas, taken in our kitchen. Marcus on the left, me on the right, the twins in the middle, and Kora Ellison at the end with her arm around Celeste and a look on her face like someone who has exactly everything she needs. Jordan made grilled cheese for everyone that afternoon. Celeste narrated the whole thing like a cooking show host. Kora laughed so hard she had to sit down. That is what it looks like. That is what we built. Not because anyone handed it to us, not because anyone showed up to help hang the walls. Because Marcus and I built it room by room with our own hands, and because Kora Ellison understood that showing up is the whole job. And because I am a woman from Milfield, Ohio, who learned very early that love has a budget, and I decided a long time ago to spend mine on the people who show up. The binder is on the shelf in my office. I do not take it out anymore. I do not need to. It did its job. It sat on that coffee table next to my mother's list, and it told the truth for me when I needed the truth told. And then I put it away. I am not angry. I want to say that clearly because I think this story can read like an anger story, and it is not. Not anymore. Anger is what I had in year 2, when the second birthday card came back. Anger is what I had when I read that letter with its careful euphemisms and its policy memo tone. Anger was useful then. It kept me from going back to a place that would have cost me more than I had to give. What I have now is something quieter. Clarity. The kind you get when you stop waiting for someone to become who you needed them to be and you just let the record be what it is. The record is what it is, and I am free. Last Thursday evening, Marcus came up behind me while I was standing at the kitchen window, watching the light go down over the backyard, and he put his hand on my shoulder. Just that. He did not say anything. Neither did I. We just stood there for a while, watching the light change, and it was the most ordinary, most extraordinary thing in the world. That is the whole story. That is all of it.